now going to enjoy a demonstration from Peter Lien from the WI Cookery School of Zumba. No cooking. Despite the headset, we are going to be cooking. So what have you got on the menu today?
Okay, so I'm going to be doing two dishes today. The first is a really nice starter for this time of year, using the best asparagus from Oxfordshire. So it's going to be some butter poached asparagus with a duck egg vinaigrette, and that's going to have a nice little wild salad with it. So a salad of nasturtium leaves, cleavers, and some asparagus shavings with a bit of crispy ham.
Okay.
So that's the first one. And then the second one is going to be some lamb, again some locally sourced lamb, peppered rump of lamb, and that's going to be served with a broad bean, anchovy, and oven-dried tomato mixture, which again, a nice light dish for summer. Right.
All right. Well, I'm going to be bombarding you with questions whilst you cook. Hopefully I won't be too much of a distraction. I'll let you get underway. Let's get out of the starting blocks first.
Right. Okay. Well, these dishes are very, very quick to make and nice and easy. And they're sort of some of the dishes that we cook at the cookery school on our dinner parties class. For those of you who don't know, we're a cookery school that's based just outside Abingdon in Marcham. Originally set up by the WI, but open to absolutely everybody. And we run courses in everything from bread making to jam making to dinner parties, sushi, Spanish, you name it, we do it. So this, as I said, is some of the food that we've been recently cooking. So the first thing I'm going to do is try and get this to work. I'm going to need to use the lighter. There we go. So we're just going to melt the butter. And it looks like a lot of butter, and it is, which is fine with asparagus, I think. And it's really just to cook the asparagus in. I mean, there's various different ways of cooking asparagus that you've probably tried, steaming, in water, but I think this buttery method is a really flavoursome way of cooking asparagus. And actually, a lot of it doesn't stay on the asparagus, you drain it off, so it's not so bad after all. I think the wind is blowing out my hob. There we go, keep my hand on it. Okay, so I've got my asparagus here.
Now, short season, isn't it, asparagus?
It's a very short season, and actually because of the weather recently, it's been a very late season. So normally you'd expect asparagus to be coming in sort of mid-April, last week of April, but in fact in this area, because of the terrible wet spring we've had, it hasn't really been coming in until sort of the first 2 weeks of May, so that probably means we'll have a longer season into June, but it has been a bit slower this year to kick off. Right, so let's have a look. So what I'm doing to prepare the asparagus is I'm just trimming them down to the end. Usually you want to break it off where you've got a slightly woody stem, and I'm just thinking a little bit about the plate that I'm going to serve this on, and I want my asparagus to be all sort of nicely trimmed to fit this plate here, so they're kind of there already. I'll just do a couple more. So I'm just going to take it down from about there, just from below the head, below the tip. And then after the first sort of layer of shaving, which I'll throw away, I'm just going to shave a little bit more off, and that's going to go into the salad, the garnish that's going to go on top of these asparagus once they're cooked. So I'll just take a bowl and then just take them down a little bit further, and what happens is you get nice little bits of raw asparagus. And often in cooking it's nice to have a mixture of raw and cooked ingredients, basically the same ingredient, but just for different types of flavour. So let's take a bit more.
How can you tell when the asparagus is at its best? I mean, if it starts getting a bit tired...
Yeah, you don't want it to get it too woody. I mean, once they're getting a bit old, you have quite woody asparagus, but in the same...
It's a bit wrinkly, doesn't it?
That's right, and once you've had it in the fridge for a little bit too long, they're not quite right. And the other thing is obviously you can get very, very thin asparagus. Actually, I'm just going to peel the whole asparagus here and use it all as garnish. Yeah, you can buy this really, really thin stuff, and that is so hard to cook because it cooks so quickly, actually. Asparagus is a very quick cooking vegetable, and the worst thing you can do is just overcook it so it becomes soggy and nasty. So you want it to still retain some crunch and some bite once you're eating it.
the flame's still there.
Yeah, it's still there. I haven't put my butter on yet. So I'm just going to keep those for my salad. I'll leave the rest of my asparagus there. So before I start cooking that, I'm going to do the vinaigrette. And the vinaigrette is basically a duck egg vinaigrette. And it has some herbs in it. And it has some capers. So the herbs I'm going to use today is tarragon, which is one of my favourite herbs actually. I absolutely love it. And it has that lovely aniseedy flavour. And this vinaigrette is sort of a combination of some classic ingredients that you might find in other sauces, things like a remoulade sauce or other dressings that involve these herbs and capers. And it's a slightly sort of thinner version of that, being a vinaigrette. And the classic things obviously with asparagus is to have some hollandaise sauce or dunk it into a boiled duck egg. So this is a nice way of using duck eggs in a different way. So you just need to pick off the leaves of your tarragon, and everything's going to go into a little mini blender to chop up, so you don't need to worry too much about how far to chop them down. But you need a nice sort of half tablespoon of tarragon to go into this.
Do you always want to use fresh herbs for this, or is the little jar that's been lurking at the back of the cupboard for years going to do?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think fresh herbs are just completely different in flavour to dried herbs, and this is sort of my favourite time of the year really, because now herbs are beginning to come through in the garden. Where we are in March, and we have the most beautiful grounds. It's a Georgian country house with amazing grounds, and the herb garden there just has the most amazing herbs, things that you probably never even heard of, and these really old herbs that are now sort of coming back in fashion actually. And I've been just going around that herb garden, picking things and trying things out, which is really nice.
Do herbs come in and out of fashion? Do you see that as a chef?
I think so, yes. I think there are, some old-fashioned herbs that don't tend to get used very often. Things like lovage and borage and anise hyssop. They're all sorts of plants that have been used in the past for culinary uses and medicinal uses. And now a lot of the modern chefs are finding new ways of using them. So. I don't know if you've seen Great British Menu recently, but some of the chefs on there have been using some of these kind of old-fashioned, shall we call them, herbs, and doing really creative things with them. So it's an interesting thing to try and do and find. All right, so I'm just adding some parsley now to my tarragon.
And that's flat leaf parsley.
Flat leaf parsley, yeah. You could use curly. There's a slight difference in flavour, but you could, in a dish like this where it's all going to get blended up, you can use either really. Alright, I'm hoping it's not all going to blow off my board while I do this. Alright, while I'm doing this, the other garnish for this is some crispy ham, and when you cook you need to think not only about flavour but also about texture. So a bit of crispy Parmesan just crunched on top of this dish actually gives a nice bit of saltiness, but also a nice bit of texture too. So all I need to do is just take a little tray, place my one sheet of Parmesan on top. No oil needed because there's the fat from the Parmesan, and then we're just going to pop that into this oven for a few minutes just to crisp up. Right, so here is my mixer, so I'm just going to keep my herbs back for a second and pop my other bits in. So what I've done here, I've done this already, I soft boiled a duck egg, so that was cooked for about 4 minutes, and you want sort of a nice ruddy yolk, because what happens is the yolk emulsifies the vinaigrette and makes it a little bit thicker. So we're going to pop that in there like that.
Why duck eggs specifically?
Duck eggs just got a richer flavour. You could use a hen egg in this, but it's just a nice sort of richer flavour in this. So I'm going to pop my capers in. They're just salted capers that have been washed and drained. Pop those in. And then I've got some white wine vinegar and some olive oil. Okay, so I'm going to have to turn around to do this, but I'm just going to pulse this away.
How did you first get into cooking, Peter?
Well, that's a very interesting question. I came to cooking fairly late. I used to work in a completely different industry, and but I've always loved cooking, and I used to work in London, and decided at one point in my life, in my 30s, that actually cooking was what I loved to do. So I thought, I've got to go and do it. I've got to give up my job, retrain, start again, right from the bottom, and follow what my passion is. And that's how I became a cook, basically.
So who or what first ignited that passion before you were in the industry?
Before I was in, it was probably my mum, like most cooks. You know, most cooks are inspired by what happens in their own household. I was never really inspired by the whole celebrity chef thing. It was just a love of cooking and just trying out new things that was really interesting to me. So that's your basic vinaigrette with the duck egg, and you'll see it's gone quite whitey and yellow, and that's because it's nicely emulsified. I'm now going to add my herbs, like that, and a bit of salt and pepper. And then we'll just give that another blast.
What would happen, playing devil's advocate here, if you overdid the blasting?
Nothing.
Okay, that's
nothing at all.
No.
Right. But it just shows you that you don't really need to do much blending, and you know, a little hand blender like this is perfect for this little dressing. You don't need one of those huge Magimixes or anything like that. So if you haven't got, you know, a big Magimix at home, these things are really useful because you get the attachment that you can make soup with, and these little things for doing pestos and other little small things like that. Alright, so dressing is made, that's nice and ready. So I'm now going to pop that back on. And the asparagus really don't take very long to cook. They take about 3 to 4 minutes. These are slightly thicker than the ones we've been using recently, so it might take a little bit longer, but no more than that. And then let's talk about the little salad that's going to go on top. And what I've got is, I went for a walk this morning and was picking some wild garlic for my other dish that I'm going to be doing later. But the other thing that I'm going to use here is cleaver tips. Has anyone heard of cleavers? Cleavers are those long, very stringy weeds that you walk by and they stick to your clothes. They're very sticky, do you know what I mean? And yeah, actually, if you take the tips of them, the very young tips, they've got a really nice flavour of raw pea. So you can actually go and forage them and add them to salads, things like that. The other name for cleavers, if you don't, is probably goosegrass. Yeah. Or another one is called sticky willy. But I don't think anyone wants to eat sticky willy, so I'll keep it at cleavers. Okay, so my butter is melting nicely there.
Is that salted or unsalted?
That's unsalted butter. I always use unsalted butter in cooking, just so that I can adjust the saltiness of the finished dish with salt itself. So get that melting and foaming away, and then in my little dish here with my asparagus, I'm just going to add my cleaver tips. So if you can't get cleaver tips, which you can get them everywhere now, they're all over the place. In winter, maybe some pea shoots, something like that would be a nice little garnish for this too. Now the other thing I'm going to add to this is nasturtium leaves from my little nasturtium plant here. And if you've never had nasturtium's an edible plant. You can eat the flowers and you can eat the leaves. Have you had them, Joe, before?
Yeah. My mum used to put them in salads, and everyone at school thought my mum was a little bit weird. But I'm glad that 30 odd years later I can defend her on it.
Absolutely, yes. And they've got a real sort of peppery flavour to them, almost like a radish actually. So if you ever see one in a garden centre, just pick one off and have a nibble, surreptitiously. So I've got just some little nasturtium leaves there.
You really want the young?
Just the little ones, just from the bottom of the plant. These ones would be a little bit big and wouldn't really look quite right. So I'm going to pop my asparagus in now. I'm just going to slightly trim the ends off. There we go, and that can get to go into the butter just to poach away for a few minutes.
Are you just doing that in a standard frying pan?
Yeah, standard frying pan.
Could you use a griddle pan for that?
You could do it with griddle pan, but with the butter, it doesn't really work because obviously the butter collects in the grooves. That's the word, yeah. So you really need probably a flat pan for this. And one that isn't on a tilt. We seem to be falling this way. So I'm just going to hold it fairly flat so I can get these going. And then just leave them there. So my parma ham's out of the oven now, and you just need to leave it there. And once it's out of the oven and cooling down, it becomes very crisp. And once it's crisp, you can just shatter it, you can break it into little pieces like this. So that once you dress your salad, you can just sprinkle it on top. Alright, so it's still going. So I think we're cooking on gas today, which is slightly not quite as strong as domestic gas.
Now you run kids classes too, don't you?
We do. Contrary to popular belief, given the name of our cookery school, which is the WI Cookery School, we are open to not just ladies. We have classes for absolutely everybody, including children, and they're very, very popular. We run them in the school holidays, half-term holidays as well, and they're a great way of just getting children into cooking, which I think is a very important thing. And we do lots of classes from baking to pasta making, and our next one I think is a Halloween themed class in October. But it's a great fun thing to do, and you can come along with a child or a grandchild and just spend some time with them cooking, which is lovely.
Which is most challenging for you? Kids who've got no real preconceived ideas of cooking, or an adult who's blindly saying, I can't cook, I'll never be able to get it right?
Well, the interesting thing is when I started to work at the WI Cookery School, which was about a year ago, and I took the job, and everyone's like, oh my goodness, you're going to go and work with the WI, you're absolutely crazy. You know, they're going to tell you how to cook, they've been doing it longer than you have. And I said, fair enough, yeah, they probably know a lot about jam making and cake making and things like that. But actually, what I say to a lot of the, because we do have a lot of WI members who come, I do say that you can always learn something new, and the ethos of our cookery school is that we offer inspiration to whoever you are and whatever level of cooking you do. So everyone has their own challenges, but everyone it's fulfilling for whoever you are really. Right, so these are just still poaching away. I just need a fork. The best way to check whether your asparagus is ready is just a little fork to see if it's going in nicely. So let's see if I've got one around somewhere. I don't. I use the end one. I can be good. Let's just have a quick coat. Yeah, they're looking good. Alright, so I'm going to take those out now and just drain them onto some kitchen paper.
Temperature wise,
yeah.
In terms of the heat you're cooking that on?
This one here?
Yeah. It's
on full heat. Because you want your butter to be nice and hot.
Yeah. It's just browning slightly, I can see.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. Butter will always brown, and actually it gives it a nice nutty flavour with a little bit of brown butter.
And we all learnt that word caramelise in the last hour.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. Alright, so we'll leave that there. So now just drain that off on the kitchen paper, remove most of the butter, and then we can dress our plate. So a nice long plate works really well for this. So you can pop your asparagus on. Just go like that. Stack them up a bit. I just need a little spoon.
Nick, where did you find the spoons?
The wooden spoons.
No, little spoons.
I brought those.
Oh.
Let me see if I've got some.
Thank you. Alright, so we've got that on there. We're just going to drizzle over some dressing when I get a spoon. I'm just going to pop a little bit of the dressing onto the salad, just to coat that so it's not too dry. Let's try and do it with the spatula. Should we just pour it on, shall we? So just a little bit over the main part of the asparagus, and then dress with your salad on top. we go. And then just crumble over some of the Parma ham. Thank you, Chef. Lovely, thank you. And then just clean up. Right, so that's the first dish, which is a butter poached asparagus with duck egg vinaigrette and a wild garden salad and some Parma ham. Right. Thank you. Alright, so moving on, can we just clear this down and we'll get started on the lamb.
Presentation of that, I mean, it's really worth thinking about the plates you're going to be using, isn't it?
Absolutely.
The shape and the
yeah,
colour.
I mean, it's logical to use a nice rectangular plate for an asparagus dish like that. But also, you know, you'll see in restaurants now, you see much more use of bowls rather than plates, because you know, things like dishes that have a lot of sauce, that really works well. And I'm going to use a bowl for my next dish actually.
You can see you're the professional because you clear away as you go along. That's something I always fall down on. And in our house there's a rule of whoever cooks, the other one washes up, so I'm not hugely popular when I start getting creative.
Well, I kind of wish I was Gary James from The Man with my two assistants helping me out and doing my prep for me, but I'm afraid I don't. Alright, so the next dish we're going to do is rump of lamb, and that's going to be with some broad beans and some wild garlic and some tomatoes. So the first thing I need to do is we're going to pepper this lamb. So rather like you might have a peppered fillet of beef, we're going to do a peppered rump of lamb just as a change. And it's absolutely delicious. So I've got a lovely rump of lamb here, which I trimmed off and I removed the skin. And this is from the old farm shop in Harwell, who breed their own lambs, and they have some lovely, lovely meat.
And good butchers will always help you out with the cuts and
yes.
whatever it is you're looking for.
If you don't want to do too much of the prep yourself, you can always ask the butcher to do it themselves. But you know, I think also it's good to give it a go yourself and try and start to prepare meat a little bit more. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm taking my rump of lamb and just dabbing off with a bit of kitchen paper, because you want a quite dry surface before you put the peppercorns on. And I've got some coarsely ground peppercorns here. So I'm just going to sprinkle some into a tray. So it's going to blow in your face and you're going to start sneezing. There we go. Just need to smooth that down. There we go. Alright, so a nice flat base. And the most important thing here is that you don't salt the meat before you do this. Now, you always hear about seasoning meat before cooking, but if you salt the meat before doing this, it draws the moisture out and then all the peppercorns will fall off. So remember, don't do that. Just go straight in, flat side down, just press down quite hard onto the peppercorns and they will stick to the meat. There we go. So I just need another pan. So this is going to be firstly sealed in the pan, or firstly cooked in the pan, and then we'll pop it into the oven to finish off roasting. So we need a pan that's nice and hot. What happens is, once you've got a nice hot pan and you put your lamb in, you think, oh, the peppercorns are all going to fall off. But what happens is the fibres in the lamb all start to grip onto the peppercorns and they don't fall off. It forms a lovely, lovely crust which stays throughout the cooking. You need a nice hot pan for that. And a light that doesn't go out.
Conspiring against you.
I know. Yeah, I'm going to keep my hand on this. Right, please stay on. Okay, I'm just going to empty out this pan because I'll need it again.
Do you have preferred pans that you use? I mean, we were talking about quality of equipment earlier on with Nick as well.
I love a brand of pan called SKK, which is a German brand, and they have.
How important is it to get something that you're happy to work with?
I think it's very important because you need to understand how quickly pans heat up, because all different pans heat up at different rates, and my German SKK pans are very, very thick, very, very hard wearing. They take a little bit longer to heat up, but then they retain the heat for longer as well, whereas a thinner pan often gets really hot very, very quickly. Let's get this one on as well. Alright, so the accompaniment to this lamb dish is some broad beans with anchovies. Now, anchovies is something that I used to absolutely despise. You don't like them? No, you know, on their own, eating an anchovy on its own or on a pizza for me, oh no, horrible. The flavour is just too intense, but actually mixed into some other savoury dishes, and lamb in particular is a great partner for anchovies. I've become a great lover of anchovies and stopped putting them in loads of things now. And you all may have heard of the different tastes that we can all taste on our tongues, and the very fashionable umami that everybody's talking about now, the taste of savouriness. Well, anchovies are very, very high in the substance that stimulates that sense on your tongue. So I like to use it in lots of dishes now to just give a really rounded flavour. Alright, so let's see how hot this is. It's a bit of olive oil. So you see that the pepper's all sticking nicely to the lamb.
Just on the one side?
Just on the one side. Not very hot, but we'll go with it. And then in this pan, we've got some broad beans. Now, broad beans are not quite in season yet, but you can use frozen broad beans, which you can get at most supermarkets now. The most important thing with a broad bean is that you peel it. And I grew up with broad beans that weren't peeled, and I thought they were absolutely disgusting. And as a child, I never used to eat them. And I didn't realise that they could be peeled. And I think my mum or my school or something used to just cook them and plonk them on a plate, and that was it. And then I found out you could actually peel them, which is not only much nicer in flavour, but looks much nicer as well. You get much more of a vibrant green. So I actually spent all yesterday sat on a bench in the gardens of the cookery school in the sunshine, just podding and skinning broad beans, which is incredibly therapeutic, and it's a nice thing to do. I never find that a chore, I have to say. This is getting hot. I might transfer this one over. Now, the other element to this is some baby tomatoes, some cherry tomatoes, or you can get baby plum tomatoes that have just been oven dried. So all I've done is cut them in half and pop them onto a baking tray in a very low oven, so no more than 80 degrees, and just left them there for a couple of hours just to dry out. And what that does is it really intensifies the flavour of the cherry tomato, makes them slightly sweeter, and just remove some of the moisture, so that when it goes into the broad bean mixture, it doesn't become too wet. So I've just got a shallot. I just need to chop my shallot. So any kind of shallot is fine, just finely chopped. So another course that we run at this cookery school is knife skills. If you've ever wondered how to use a knife properly, it's one of our most popular courses. And it starts with how to hold your knife, and then how to use different knives for different jobs. And it really is great for making you a faster chopper.
And keeping your fingers.
And keeping your fingers,
yeah.
Which is very important. Or fingernails for the ladies, very important. So I'm just going to turn over this lamb now.